The private memorial service for the late Reverend Jesse Jackson will be attended by family and friends at the Rainbow Push Coalition's South Side Chicago headquarters. President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to deliver a tribute acknowledging Jackson's long friendship with the late former President Nelson Mandela. Joining us to pay tribute to the human rights activist is Professor Verne Harris, a South African activist who documented the long-standing relationship between Reverend Jesse Jackson and Nelson Mandela, including their meetings in South Africa. Prof, a very good morning to you, and thank you so much for your time and for joining us. From your perspective, Prof, as an archivist and as a historian, how would you assess Reverend Jackson's role in shaping the civil rights movement and social justice efforts globally?
Well, thank you, Katlego. That's a big question, of course. Reverend Jackson was a larger-than-life figure, you know, as a human being. And certainly in interactions that I had with him, had that warmth that Madiba responded to very positively. But in terms of your question about history, Jesse Jackson was a huge figure in the civil rights movement. And indeed, he was also a very significant figure in the anti-apartheid movement. And so no surprise when Madiba came out of prison, it wasn't long before the two of them met and then worked together on certain projects.
And speaking about them working together on certain projects, I mean, you were quite fortunate to be witness of some of those relations between the late Jesse Jackson and the former statesman being Nelson Mandela. Just talk to us about what some of the highlights were with regards to those engagements between the two.
Well, they encountered one another in really significant moments. For example, on the day Madiba came out of prison, and Reverend Jackson had this genius for being in the right place at the right time. He was in Cape Town and encountered Madiba that very first day that he came out of prison. They were together when Bill Clinton was inaugurated as president of the United States. And you know, Reverend Jackson was here in South Africa in the days after Madiba died and spoke at an event at the foundation. But I think important maybe to name here is that in the early 1990s, Madiba was looking around the world for supporters, for friends who would enable the ANC to be as effective as possible in the transition to democracy. So the negotiations and then the election campaign. And Jesse Jackson was a very strong supporter of Madiba and of the ANC in that period.
And I mean, speaking of that period with the work that he did and just that influence as a civil rights movement's activist outside of the United States, talk to us particularly with Africa and South Africa during the apartheid era. And as you mentioned, the president, the former statesman, then going back and looking for figures such as Reverend Jackson to then contribute even post-apartheid.
Yes, I think you're naming something that is an important line of inquiry for all of us. And at the event at the foundation last night, this was named several times by people who contributed to the memorial there, is that we leaned heavily on friends around the world. We probably still underestimate how important global solidarity was in bringing apartheid to an end. And we again leaned heavily into those friendships during the 1990s, but we haven't done very well since then. And it's important for us as South Africans, as we are still trying to build this fledgling democracy, is that we acknowledge the contributions that were made by people like Reverend Jackson.
When you think and we look at documenting the life of Reverend Jackson, what aspects of his activism do you believe are most crucial for future generations to remember?
I think I would name two. One is the community-based dimension of his work. Always, the work that he did was rooted in community needs. The other dimension for me is more in the realm of ideas and of practice, is that he believed strongly that leaders in social justice causes should keep hope alive. And he shared this with Madiba, is that for both of them, hope was not a feeling. It wasn't an aspiration. For them, hope was a practice. It was a discipline. And I think more than ever, that practice of hope in the context of today, if we look at the state of the world right now, if we look at the state of our own country, we need these values and we need this determination.
And Prof, you speak about the community-based dimension, and you're making reference to what we are experiencing currently in the world today. In what ways does Reverend Jackson's activism exemplify the interconnectedness of the struggles for justice worldwide, especially at a time when we're looking at this conflict between the US, Israel, and Iran? How important is it in today's perspective?
Well, I think it's more important than ever, is that Reverend Jackson believed strongly that justice was indivisible. So if you're fighting for justice in the realm of gender relations, then you have to be fighting for justice in the realm of race. You have to be fighting against the exploitation of people economically. These struggles are all interconnected, and we fight them simultaneously. I think more than ever we're seeing that now globally, is that what's happening in the Middle East and the Mediterranean is impacting us directly, even though we're at the southern tip of the African continent. And I think this is going to be more and more a reality for all of us globally.
And speaking of that reality and just some of those lessons that you believe, Prof, that we can learn from Jackson's life, as well as his activism, do you believe are most relevant for contemporary social justice campaigns that we can take from his life and in pressing forward with regards to what's happening in the world today?
Yes, I've mentioned a few things already, but I think I would underline a quality that and I use this advisedly, is a quality of love, is that in the work of fighting for justice, for that just society of Madiba's dreams, of Reverend Jackson's dreams, it's unavoidable that we will be angry, we will be frustrated. But what for me, Reverend Jackson exemplified is that the key driver for him was love. Love for community, love for humanity, and love for justice. And I think these dimensions of struggle in the world today are more important than they ever were.
No, certainly. Prof, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this morning. We certainly do appreciate this tribute that you have given to Reverend Jesse Jackson. That was Professor Verne Harris, who's an archivist and historian. Now, still